Across America, countless individuals experience the age of Trumpism not merely as policy shifts, but as profound emotional trauma. The initial disbelief has transformed into persistent anxiety, fundamentally altering how citizens perceive their nation's trajectory and their place within it. What seemed impossible just years ago, the weakening of democratic foundations, the rise of extreme nationalism, the fragility of institutional safeguards, has become our lived experience under Donald Trump's influence on American politics. Those who cherish inclusive democracy and incremental social progress face something deeper than mere political disagreement. This is collective mourning, a response to watching shared values crumble before their eyes. The anatomy of democratic grief. Recent scholarship examining political emotions in contemporary America identifies loss as the defining feeling of our era. Professor Kevin J. Doy at Columbia University, in his research on the politics of emotions during the Trump era, highlights how this transcends electoral disappointment. It represents the erosion of fundamental moral agreements. Many Americans were raised believing that despite its flaws, our democracy rested on certain non-negotiable principles: honoring election outcomes, constraining executive authority, holding leaders accountable, and protecting human dignity. These foundations now seem dangerously unstable. Citizens mourn the dissolution of shared truth, where objective facts held meaning, where cruelty provoked outrage, and where violence and corruption disqualified leaders rather than being rationalized away. Public life has lost its sense of restraint. Behaviors once considered absolutely unacceptable have been normalized. This grief intensifies when realizing that many fellow Americans don't perceive any crisis at all. The sorrow stems not from losing power, but from losing the invisible agreements that made disagreement tolerable and democracy functional. Because these norms are intangible, their disappearance defies easy explanation or repair. The result is persistent sadness infiltrating daily existence, reshaping citizens' relationships with their country and each other. The burden of collective shame. Alongside grief lives overwhelming shame, a sense that we collectively failed to prevent this deterioration. How were warning signals ignored? How did protective institutions collapse so completely? This shame often becomes deeply personal. Educators, journalists, legal professionals, students, parents, those who trusted in civic institutions and democratic processes, now question whether their faith was fundamentally misguided. They revisit past moments, wondering if earlier, louder action could have changed our trajectory. Unlike resistance movements that channel guilt into defiance, this emotional terrain offers no redemption rituals, no comforting narratives of innocence. Shame simply accumulates, transforming into profound exhaustion. People feel morally overwhelmed, as though constantly failing to meet the demands of an endless emergency. Fear as a constant companion. Fear has become woven into the fabric of political consciousness. This isn't abstract paranoia, it's concrete and forward-looking. Citizens worry about unconstrained power, punished dissent, and conditional legal protections. They fear for vulnerable communities, immigrants, journalists, LGBTQ individuals, and ordinary people caught in an increasingly punitive system. This fear draws from historical precedent and contemporary examples of democratic erosion worldwide. Yet even justified fear carries consequences. Chronic stress, constant vigilance, and the sensation that danger perpetually looms. Many report guilt when resting or dread when attempting to disengage. Fear reshapes behavior. People avoid political discussions, retreat from public participation, or self-censor both online and in person. Over time, this undermines the confidence that democratic engagement requires. Survival becomes about emotional endurance rather than civic action. The collapse of institutional trust. Perhaps the most destabilizing shift has been trust's disintegration, not just in leaders, but in institutions once considered democracy's backbone. Courts, legislatures, media outlets, and professional standards appear vulnerable or corrupted. The belief that someone will intervene has steadily disappeared, producing painful betrayal. Rules were supposed to provide structure, expertise was supposed to guide decisions, safeguards were supposed to function. When they fail, citizens lose clear sources of authority and reassurance. This corrosive distrust makes it difficult to sustain hope without slipping into delusion. Many oscillate between harsh realism and desperate optimism, searching for evidence that democratic restoration remains possible. The complicated presence of anger. Rage permeates everything, yet sits uncomfortably. Citizens are furious about corruption, cruelty, and power's abuse. They're enraged by dishonesty, by apathy, by reality's manipulation. However, anger is frequently deemed dangerous or morally questionable, something requiring suppression rather than strategic direction. Consequently, anger often turns inward, manifesting as burnout, resentment, or hopelessness instead of sustained activism. Without shared frameworks for directing anger toward systems rather than individuals, it becomes isolating and counterproductive. History demonstrates that meaningful transformation has always required anger, but anger channeled thoughtfully, ethically, and collectively. The question isn't whether anger belongs in democratic life, but how to harness it without being consumed. Hope as discipline. In this environment, hope cannot be simplistic optimism. It cannot mean passively expecting improvement. For many today, hope resembles discipline more than emotion, the deliberate choice to continue caring despite limited evidence. It's refusing to surrender moral language to cynicism or authoritarianism. This resilient hope survives through small shared actions, showing up, educating, organizing, voting, supporting neighbors, speaking truth even when it seems pointless. It lives in communities insisting on dignity and movements remembering earlier struggles against seemingly invincible forces. Critically, this hope doesn't deny fear or grief. It coexists with them. It affirms that people can be afraid, yet still act, can mourn, yet still resist. A tragic example, the death of Renee Nicole Good. The killing of Renee Nicole Good by a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent in Minneapolis stands as a devastating example of how far executive power has drifted from democratic accountability under the Trump administration. Renee was driving away when the agent fired into her vehicle, a scenario that contradicts federal claims that she posed an imminent threat. Outrage erupted not only because a civilian lost her life at the hands of a federal agent without having committed a crime, but because of the administration's response, defending the use of lethal force and deploying thousands of additional agents to the Twin Cities rather than ordering immediate independent investigation or accountability measures. Many view Renee's death, one of several violent federal actions in recent months, as a chilling indicator of unchecked authority, eroding civil liberties, establishing dangerous precedents where deadly force becomes normalized in domestic operations rather than remaining an absolute last resort, reserved only for the most extreme circumstances. The path forward. The emotional toll of the Trump era is undeniable. Feeling devastated by democratic deterioration isn't weakness, it's evidence of moral commitment. Exhaustion isn't personal failure, it's the natural response to sustained stress. Grief indicates something precious is threatened. Politics has always been emotional. The danger isn't that emotions exist now, but that they're so often dismissed or born in isolation. Acknowledging loss, fear, anger, and hope isn't self-indulgent. It's necessary for endurance. As Professor Kevin J. Doy's research suggests, understanding these political emotions is crucial to comprehending our current moment and finding pathways forward. If democracy is to be reconstructed, it won't be by those who feel nothing. It will be by those who feel deeply, who refuse to normalize the unacceptable, and who continue, despite everything, to care.